My name is Evelyn Monroe. I'm 58 years old, a widow, and I live in a quiet suburb just outside Santa Fe, New Mexico. For the past 22 years, I've worked as a bookkeeper at a mid-sized construction company. It's not glamorous work, but it's stable. And stability was the only thing I could cling to after my husband died in a snowstorm when our children were still in school. I raised two kids, mostly on my own. Madeline, my daughter, who just turned 33 last month, and Aaron, her younger brother, who's 30 now. I poured everything I had into raising them. I clipped coupons while sending them to summer camps. I missed promotions to attend parent-teacher conferences. I wore the same winter coat for 7 years so they could both get new laptops for college. I gave them everything I didn't have growing up, and I never once asked for anything in return. Last Wednesday morning, as I was finishing my first cup of coffee, I received an email that changed everything. The sender was Madeline, no subject line, just her name sitting quietly in my inbox. I smiled at first, thinking maybe it was a quick note before her big day, maybe an update on the caterer, or a thank you for the bracelet I sent last week. We had just spoken on the phone about wedding details, not even 3 weeks ago. I'd already contributed $25,000 to help her secure the Mountain View venue in Aspen she had dreamed of since college. I even offered to handle the down payment for the florist she'd adored since planning her first mock wedding on Pinterest. But when I opened the email, the smile fell off my face like a leaf caught in a sudden frost. Mom! That was how it began. No dear mom, no hi. Just mom, like a label. She said that after finalizing the guest list with her fiancé Ryan and his family, they'd decided it was best if I attended the ceremony virtually. She claimed the list had become tight and that Ryan's parents were hoping for a streamlined, intentional experience. Then she added a line I'll never forget. If you still want to be a part of it, we set up a livestream link. Should be just like being there. I stared at those words, the smiley face, the detached tone. I didn't cry. My hands didn't tremble. Something inside me just settled, like a snow globe that had finally stopped shaking. There was no fight left in me, no fire, just this still, echoing silence where love used to live. I clicked reply, typed 4 words. Sure. Enjoy your big day. No punctuation, no emotion, just quiet retreat. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to beg. I wanted the silence to say everything for me. I closed the laptop. My coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. Then I put on my cardigan, gathered my things, and drove to work like it was any other Wednesday. But it wasn't. That was the day something in me quietly broke, and something else quietly awakened. That was the day I stopped pretending my sacrifices still meant something. That was the day I knew everything was about to change. The drive to work that morning felt colder than usual, even though the New Mexico sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't hum. I didn't think about dinner or bills or errands. My mind just kept circling one quiet question. How did we get here? I parked in my usual spot beside the building, waved to the receptionist like always, and sat down at my desk. The numbers on my screen looked the same, but they felt pointless now. I typed absently, inputting invoices into the system, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Not in Aspen, not in the wedding, but back in the years when being a mother felt like the only thing that mattered. I remembered standing in the cramped laundry room with damp bills spread across the dryer, trying to decide if I could afford Madeline's college application fees or the electricity bill. I remembered working weekends at the local bookstore just to buy her textbooks. When she called me crying her first year, homesick and overwhelmed, I drove 6 hours straight to sit on her dorm floor and braid her hair until she fell asleep. When Aaron got into a car accident at 22, I used my emergency fund, meant for car repairs and groceries, to pay his hospital deductible. When Madeline moved to Chicago for a job that lasted 5 months, I wired her the deposit for her overpriced apartment and pretended I wasn't terrified for her safety in a new city. Every decision I made, every dollar I spent, had their names on it. I never complained. That's what mothers do, right? But reading her email, I didn't feel like a mother. I felt like a utility, like something useful, until I wasn't. My boss, Marianne, stopped by my desk mid-morning. She's sharp, direct, but warm in her own way. Mid-50s, no children, wears navy blazers like armor. "You okay?" she asked, setting a cup of chamomile tea on my desk. "You look like someone told you the IRS lost all their files." I managed a tight smile. "Just didn't sleep well." She didn't press. She never did. But that simple gesture, a hot cup of tea and not a single demand, nearly undid me. After all the noise that had been running through my head since I opened that email, it reminded me that I still existed outside of being someone's mother. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Madeline. Again. I didn't answer. Then came the voicemail. Then a text. Then another. "Mom, please answer." "This is getting out of hand. Why aren't you responding?" "We need to talk." "This isn't funny." I set my phone face down on my desk. I didn't owe her anything, not today, not anymore. For so long, I'd taught myself that love was about showing up, picking up the phone, being there, no matter what. But maybe, just maybe, there was power in not answering. Maybe this time, silence would speak louder than my presence ever had. I turned back to my computer. I had payroll to finalize, and for the first time in decades, I started to think about what it might look like to finally prioritize myself. Not out of spite, but out of survival. I didn't drive straight home. I turned left instead of right, and found myself pulling into the parking lot of Sunrise First Bank, just 3 blocks from the office. I'd been banking there for years, long enough that they knew my name, asked about my kids, and always remembered to wish me happy birthday. The branch manager, Jorge Alvarez, was seated behind his desk when I walked in. He stood as soon as he saw me, smoothing his tie and offering his usual warm smile. "Mrs. Monroe," he said. "Always a pleasure. What can I do for you today?" I sat down slowly, placing my purse on the carpet beside me. My voice was steady, too steady. "I need to cancel a wire transfer." He raised an eyebrow. "Okay, which one?" "The one scheduled for tomorrow." "Aspen Wedding Collective." His fingers froze over the keyboard for just a second before he nodded and began typing. "I see it here," he said. $45,000. That's quite a payment." "I know," I replied. He hesitated, glancing up at me. "There may be a penalty depending on how far along the process is, but I'll check. May I ask, did something happen?" "The circumstances changed," I said quietly. Jorge didn't press. That's what I liked about him. He processed the request, clicked a few times, then leaned back. "You're in luck." It hadn't fully cleared. We caught it just in time. He looked at me again, this time more carefully. "Are you sure you want to cancel it?" "That's a significant amount, Mrs. Monroe." I nodded. "I'm sure." I signed the necessary form. A few strokes of a pen, and just like that, the money stayed with me. That wire was supposed to be the final installment, on top of the $25,000 I had already given Madeline to lock in her dream venue. $70,000, all for a wedding I was no longer welcome to attend. And even if they changed their minds now, the damage was done. I didn't want a seat that came only after protest. I didn't want to be tolerated. I wanted to be seen. By the time I got home, the sky was turning pink with the first signs of dusk. My porch light flicked on automatically as I stepped inside. I dropped my purse on the table, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the kettle. My phone lit up with notifications. 9 missed calls from Madeline, 2 from Aaron, 1 voicemail, trembling with panic. "Mom, please don't do this!" I turned the phone over, screen down. In the kitchen cabinet above the fridge was a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for Thanksgiving. That was supposed to be the day Madeline came home to help me cook. She'd canceled last minute. "Work emergency," she had said. I opened the bottle, poured myself a generous glass, took it out to the back porch. The air was cool, still. A neighbor's wind chime sang faintly in the breeze. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Everything was peaceful. And inside that stillness, I felt the ache begin to thaw. The layers of pain I'd buried so deep, hoping time or duty would dissolve them, rose slowly to the surface. I thought about all the birthdays I spent alone, waiting for a phone call that never came. The holidays I cooked for one. The vacations I canceled. The clothes I never bought. The things I denied myself year after year because there'll be time later. But there was never time. Only expectation. Only silence. Only being needed. And never truly wanted. And now, in the quiet of this new boundary I had drawn, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Control. A dangerous kind of clarity. I took another sip of wine and watched the sky turn from pink to deep purple. And I realized something. They thought I wouldn't act. They forgot who raised them. At 9:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. I considered not answering. I was still in my house slippers, wine glass half full, and I wasn't in the mood for apologies wrapped in excuses. But curiosity has a way of pulling you to your feet, even when your heart says stay. I opened the door and found Aaron standing there. He looked tired, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up like he'd rushed over from work. In one hand, he held his phone like a shield. His eyes darted past me, as if expecting an ambush. "Mom," he said breathlessly. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Madeline's freaking out." I opened the door wider, stepped aside without a word, and let him in. He moved past me and started pacing immediately, his voice already rising. "She said you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult, that you canceled the transfer." I closed the door gently behind him and walked back to my spot on the couch, where the wine still waited. "Difficult?" I said, my voice even. "I wasn't invited. She told me to watch from a live stream, remember?" Aaron winced. "You know it wasn't personal. Ryan's family is traditional. They wanted a curated list. No drama. Intimate." I stared at him. "Traditional? Aaron, I gave her $25,000. I was about to give her 45 more. That's not tradition. That's a transaction." He stopped pacing, froze. "Wait, you were sending another 45? I took a long sip of wine and nodded. "Was." His face went pale. "Mom, they're counting on that. The venue, the chef, the photographer. Ryan's parents are already nervous about the budget. Not my problem anymore." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man trying to reassemble a puzzle that no longer had corners. "She's your daughter," he finally said, voice rising again. "Of course it's your problem." "And I'm her mother," I said calmly. A mother who was told she didn't belong at her own child's wedding. He looked down, ran his hand through his hair. "You always make everything about yourself." That was the moment something inside me finally broke, but not like glass shattering. More like a dam collapsing after decades of pressure. "Get out of my house," I said. He looked up, startled. "What?" "You heard me. Get out." "Mom!" I stood, not yelling, not crying, just standing tall in my own living room for the first time in years. "I've given everything I had. I sacrificed more than either of you will ever understand. And I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love." He stood frozen, like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Then, slowly, he turned and walked toward the door. The click of the latch behind him was quiet, but it echoed louder than any slamming door ever could. I sat down again, heart racing, blood humming. But I didn't feel regret. I felt free. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying anyone else's disappointment, only my own peace. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was silent, still holding the heat from the day before. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, clutching a warm mug of black coffee, as the quiet crept in around me, like an old friend. For a moment, I wondered if I had dreamed it all. The email, the confrontation, the look on Aaron's face. But then my phone buzzed on the counter. Again, and again, and again. 43 missed calls, texts piled in like floodwater. From Madeline. "Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is childish. Please be reasonable. The venue just called. They said the payment didn't go through. If we don't send the rest by end of day, they'll cancel. Andrew's parents are furious." They said this proves they were right about you. At 3:24 a.m., she sent, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I took a slow sip of coffee and smiled. Of course she didn't understand. Madeline had grown up in a world where my sacrifices were invisible but constant. The electricity that kept the lights on, the silent hand that steadied her through every rough patch. She never saw the weight. I never let her. She only saw the comfort, the smooth surface, the easy warmth. She never stopped to ask what kept it all from breaking. But now it had. Later that morning, while reviewing supplier invoices at my desk, a new email appeared in my personal inbox. Subject line, please don't ruin my wedding. No greeting, no apology, just panic wrapped in entitlement. I opened it slowly. Mom, I know you're upset about the livestream thing, but this is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit. And if we don't pay the remaining balance by end-of-day Paris time, the caterer walks. Andrew's parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first. There it was. Not a plea. A proposal. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were offering terms. My presence was now negotiable, but only once the money was gone. As if being allowed to sit in the last row of my own daughter's wedding was something I should be grateful for. As if love could be earned with wire transfers. I didn't respond. I closed the email, locked my phone, and returned to my spreadsheets. Around noon, Marianne appeared beside my desk again. Lunch? She asked. That new Italian place opened down the block. I almost declined out of habit, but something in me was shifting. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the clarity. I nodded. I'd like that. We sat in a sunlit corner booth with fresh basil in a jar between us. She ordered linguine. I chose penne arrabbiata, extra spice. As we ate, she told me stories about her twin granddaughters. How one loved finger painting and the other only wore sparkles. Her voice was warm, grounded, soft. Then she leaned forward and said, Forgive me, Evelyn, but you seem lighter today. I surprised even myself. I told her everything. The email, the exclusion, the money. The night Aaron came to the house. The bank. I spoke quietly, but not weakly. Not like I was ashamed. And when I finished, she didn't gasp. She didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, Sometimes the hardest part of love is learning when to stop giving it to people who only take. She reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's safety net. Just me. When I got back to the office, more calls had come in. But I didn't pick up, because my silence was saying everything that needed to be said. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the sky was painted with the soft golds and blues of twilight. The porch light flicked on, automatic and familiar. Everything looked still, peaceful, like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't cracked open beneath my feet. But someone was sitting on my front steps. I slowed the car. At first, I couldn't quite make out who it was. Then, as I stepped out and approached, recognition washed over me. Sophia? I said. She stood up quickly. Nee, brushing imaginary lint from the sleeves of her coat. Her voice was soft, almost guilty. Hi, Mrs. Monroe. I'm sorry for just showing up. Sophia had been Madeline's best friend since 5th grade. She used to spend entire weekends at our house, curled up in blankets on the living room floor, giggling about boys and baking cookies. She called me her second mom back then. I hadn't seen her in years. It's fine, I said gently. Would you like some tea? She followed me inside, her eyes scanning the familiar walls like they held old echoes. I put the kettle on. She sat quietly at the kitchen table, her hands clasped in front of her like a nervous schoolgirl again. After a few moments, I broke the silence. Emily sent you? Sophia hesitated, then nodded. She's a mess, she admitted. They lost the venue. The florist dropped out. The band canceled. Ryan's parents are threatening to pull out of the planning altogether. I remained quiet, placing 2 mugs on the table. Sophia looked up, eyes filled with a hope I hadn't seen in a long time. She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it. Is that why you're here? I asked. To fix it? She shook her head slowly. No, I'm here to ask, is there anything she can say or do that would change your mind? I stared at the steam curling from my cup. Was there? Would a simple apology undo the feeling of being excluded? Of being reduced to a bank account? Of being told I was too much, too inconvenient, too embarrassing for a curated wedding? I looked at Sophia, still young, still hopeful. No, I said quietly, there isn't. Her shoulders sagged. Not even if she apologizes? I handed her a mug of tea. Warm, calming. Words are easy, Sophia, especially when people are desperate. But the people who love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to see you. Sophia looked down into her tea, nodding slowly. I get it, she whispered, even if she doesn't. I know you do, I said. We sat there for a while in silence. Two women from different generations, linked by one unshakable truth. Sometimes love has limits. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to walk away. Sophia didn't stay long. She didn't try to argue. She didn't beg. She just stood, hugged me gently, like the daughter I wished I still had, and walked out into the dark. And I finally closed the door on a version of myself I had long outgrown. The next morning, my house was quiet. Almost too quiet. But it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of clarity. The wedding didn't happen, not the way they had planned. According to Aaron, they scrambled for a backup venue, but everything was either booked or too expensive without the funds I'd promised. The florist refused to hold the date without payment. The band took another booking. Even the custom cake was canceled. They ended up holding a rushed ceremony in Ryan's uncle's backyard. Just a few plastic chairs, a borrowed speaker, and some paper lanterns that didn't stay lit. Only a handful of relatives showed up. Ryan's parents, bitter and embarrassed, left before the first dance. I didn't attend. And for once, I didn't feel the need to explain why. Weeks passed. One afternoon, I opened my inbox and found a message from Madeline. Long, emotional, scattered. She started by saying she didn't know how to begin, then launched into paragraphs of excuses, how things spiraled out of her control, how Ryan's family had pressured her, how she never meant to hurt me. Somewhere near the end, buried between rationalizations and self-pity, was a half-hearted apology. She wrote, I just didn't think it would matter that much. I thought you'd understand. That line hit harder than I expected. Because that was the problem. She thought I'd understand. She thought I'd bend like always. Break like always. Pay like always. I read the email once, then archived it. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. There's a strange peace that comes with letting go. Not in fury, but in resolve. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her to hurt the way I did. I just needed her to know that love isn't unconditional when it comes with conditions. For the first time in decades, I woke up not wondering who needed something from me, not waiting for the phone to ring, not bracing myself for another guilt-laced favor. I made a new rule for myself. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. I still go to work, still pay my bills. But I also started reading again. Novels with pages that crackle in my hands. I joined a pottery class at the community center. I have dinner with friends who ask how I'm doing and wait for the answer. I even took a trip to Oregon by myself, rented a cabin, woke up to birdsong and the sound of pine trees swaying in the wind. And for the first time in years, I breathed in deeply and didn't feel a weight on my chest. Because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It was late afternoon when I returned from the grocery store, bags filled with fresh herbs, ripe peaches, and the kind of cheese I used to walk right past because it felt too indulgent. Now, I don't wait for someone else to enjoy the small things with me. I buy the cheese. I set the table for one like it matters. Because it does. As I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on again. That gentle hum of habit. The sky was streaked with lavender and peach, soft like a brushstroke. Everything looked calm, like my life had finally remembered how to exhale. I parked the car, took my time unpacking. In the living room, the air was warm, touched by golden sunlight. On the shelf by the window sat a small vase, one I made myself in pottery class just last week. It leans a little to the left, imperfect, but mine. I placed the fresh flowers inside, and I smiled. No calls from Madeline today, no apologies, no accusations, just silence. And for once, I welcomed it like an old friend. Later that evening, I poured a glass of wine, sat on the back porch, and watched the wind stir the branches above me. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime played a gentle tune. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of sacrifice, the disappointment, the unraveling, and the freedom. I used to think being a good mother meant giving without boundaries, that love meant saying yes even when it hurt, that showing up was the same thing as being valued. I don't think that anymore. I think love, real love, has space for honesty, for hurt, for walking away when you're only ever called upon to give, but never to be. Madeline may never understand what she did, and that's okay, because I'm no longer waiting to be chosen. I choose myself. Tomorrow I'll return to work. Maybe I'll grab lunch with Marianne. Maybe I'll start a new book, something fiction, something bold. Or maybe I'll just sit here again, beneath the wide sky, letting it remind me how big the world is outside of everyone else's expectations. This isn't the ending I imagined for myself as a mother, but maybe it's the beginning I needed as a woman. And that, I think, is enough.